Well, hello, Paul. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm tired. It's the end of the week, but holding on. It's the 14th day of confinement. So, yeah, it's getting tougher.
Understandably. Well, that's what we're here to talk about today. Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Stern, the Executive Director of OutRight Action International, or OutRight for short. And this is one of the very first episodes of what we're calling OutRight TV. And while we're all cooped up in our homes across 7 countries globally, we thought that we would try to show you some stories of how LGBTIQ people from our own staff or the partners that we work with around the world are faring in the face of COVID. And I thought it would be very appropriate to start with none other than Paul Jansen from his home in Sitges, Spain. Paul has the distinct honor of being OutRight's Senior Advisor for Global Advocacy, which means he supervises all of OutRight's programs globally. So Paul, welcome to OutRight TV.
Thank you, Jessica. Happy to be on.
And I should say to our viewers, if there are any viewers other than possibly your husband and my wife, that we've never done this before. So this is sort of like one of our regular staff meetings, except for the first time we have an audience. So let's see how it goes.
I'm all with you.
All right. So Paul, why don't you introduce yourself for our audience? Who are you and what do you do? And tell us something that's not just about your job, like what you do as a coping strategy in your personal life.
Good, happy to do so. Like as Jessica told just a couple of minutes ago, I'm the Senior Advisor for Global Advocacy and OutRight. I oversee the programs and the program team that is spread out over the world in countries as diverse as Singapore, Philippines, Belize, Jamaica, well, you name them, it's 7 countries where we are, next to our closed head office in New York at the moment, also confined, which also has an impact. Other than that, like I'm at home, fortunately. Like I have also colleagues who are stranded between borders. Probably we will talk a little bit about that later with my husband and my cat. So that's very fortunate. I'm a fanatic cook. I have 365 cookery books. So I have something to do. The only thing is in Spain where I am, we can't go out for walks and everything. So I need to keep a diet and make only small plates and portions in order not to end up like a balloon. So that I can share.
Well, I'm already learning new things about you. I did not realize that while other people are hoarding food, you actually have spent your life hoarding cookbooks. That is a good hoarding habit to have during a quarantine.
I can give you recipes from Tibetan deer soup to Ugandan blood soup, you name it, I will have a recipe for you.
Well, as a vegetarian, I think I'll skip the blood soup, but I'll encourage you to find your passion.
Good.
So you mentioned that that you're in Sitges, Spain. Of course, Sitges is a beach town just outside of Barcelona. Can you describe to us what it's like in Sitges right now?
Yes, well, it usually is a bustling tourist destination, gay tourist destination. But 14 days ago, quite sudden, the government imposed a ban and restrictions on the daily life in Spain, which also meant that all the restaurants, bars, shops, everything had to close with immediate effect. So Saturday morning, the 14th of March, I will never forget it. I went with a friend to a market, and at the moment that we were there, people started packing. And it went down, it went closed. And I had meetings planned for the evening to go out with friends because we just came back from holiday. So it was a good time to see everybody again. And all our favorite sites are closed. Like it's a ghost town. There's no one on the streets. Like we only can go out to buy groceries or to go to a hospital. And for the rest, you're not allowed to be on the street. So you're really confined to the home. You can't meet people there. You can't be with more than 2 people. But those people have to live in the same house. So there's all kinds of restrictions, and that for a bustling town like Sitges, it's killing. It's like there's nothing going on. I went to the supermarket and you have there long lines of people waiting. It's only 40 people allowed in a supermarket at the same time. You need to keep 1.5 meters to 2 meters distance, and that you have to maintain outside as well in the waiting queue to go in. So when you go in, you wait first half an hour, 45 minutes to go in. then you are being disinfected. You need to put on plastic gloves. There are guards at the door that count if there's space for you to go in and if you are disinfected properly. And then you're told to do your groceries very fast because there's a long line of people waiting. And then, of course, not all the products are available at the moment, as we saw all around the world as well. People have been doing lots of grocery shopping, and some things are just not available at the moment.
Thank you for describing what it's like there. You know, I'm based in Brooklyn, New York, and I have to say I've been sort of following the news from Spain and your own accounts about what's been happening as a sort of bellwether of what would come our way. You know, you started talking about shortages at the grocery stores and lines to get in, you know, when New York was still in denial that this was coming here. You know, and so I felt very, very sorry for what you've been going through, and also sort of privileged to have this, in a way, built-in warning system. Unfortunately, our governments don't seem to be paying attention to it, but at the community level, we share information, and that's one of the ways we survive. I mean, what I'm reading about Spain is that right now it, of course, has the second highest infection rate after Italy in all of Europe. That there's been, according to data out today from the BBC, a spike in deaths, but also a drop in new infections. So what I'm reading is that there's a little bit more hope. Spain's health minister, emergency health minister, announced that it's a sign that some of these, you know, draconian, severe social distancing methods that you're describing have been working. What do you feel like? Do you feel like all of this hardship is starting to pay off?
I hope so. I really, really hope so. And it's only the first day that there seems to be a slowing down of the virus in infecting people. But also the problem is, like, there's not enough test kits in the country. Like, there's a little bit of a scandal because there were like many test kits bought in China, and a big part of them are non-functional. They're not okay. So there's like a shortage of test kits. So I have no clue if the figures that people are mentioning here, if those are the true figures. I think many more people already have been contaminated with the virus and are spreading. So I think the measures are necessary. Therefore, we are sticking to them. We're adhering to them, because of course we want to go through this rather sooner than later. Like, I can't tell you how frustrating it is to be in a seaside town. Spring is coming. It's getting nicer weather, and you can't go anywhere. It's such a double feeling. Like, it's like unreal. It's like a kid in the grocery store or in the candy store. Like, okay, this is what I want, but I can't have it. It's really strange. And of course, the silence in the streets. It's so silent here. I think the only thing what I really like is at 8 o'clock in the evening, as we saw in more countries, people are clapping for all the people working in services and all kinds of services for like holding this epidemic, and everybody's applauding 8 o'clock at night. That's beautiful. That gives me the feeling that, of course, we still have our humanity and we care for each other, and that keeps me going as well, because for the rest, it's impossible to have contact with people. Like, Spain is a very like bodily country, if I can say it like that. We're out on the streets, we're hugging, we're kissing, we do all these kinds of things. It's prohibited at the moment. So yes, I say to my neighbor hi from 2 meters distance, but we're not drinking like a glass of wine. It's all prohibited. Yes, we have internet, we have WhatsApp, but that's not what we're about. We're humans. We like the contact, and that's not possible at the moment. So it's hard, but okay. In order to keep the good spirit, let's do this 2 more weeks, and then hopefully, slowly but surely, we can go back to normal.
Well, it's really nice to hear that you've been observing the 8 p.m. ritual of clapping, because I know that you're not just social distancing from friends and colleagues and neighbors, but actually your own husband, Diego, is currently quarantined in your apartment. What happened to Diego that you had to go to such extreme measures?
Well, unfortunately, in his work, one of his colleagues was tested positive on the coronavirus, and he had been sitting next to this colleague. So they were sent home with immediate effect and with strict measures to be in a separate room for 14 days, We just passed the first week now. I can't be in close contact with him, so I need to leave like the food in front of the guest room where he is, and any other things that he needs. So there's only one word. It's weird. Like, we're married and I'm sleeping alone, and I know that there's someone in the guest room, but like I can't be near that. It's so ridiculous, but necessary. Fortunately, at the moment, he's doing good and he's fine. He doesn't show any symptoms. So I really hope that it stays like that. And then within a week, the quarantine will be lifted. But it's these things that are so impactful on our lives, on my life, and it just wears you out psychologically at one point as well. Like, I'm cooking, I'm putting like a coffee in front of the door. Instead of having a nice meal together to catch up, I'm sitting in front of the door, and that's how we communicate. The doctor is calling every 3 to 4 hours, like, are you still maintaining the quarantine? Yes, we do. Of course, we can't take the risk, even though everything looks good, but you never know with this virus. So we just keep ourselves strict to whatever the doctors are saying that we have to do. And then hopefully, counting the days down till next week Friday, that it's over.
I'm impressed that Diego's doctor calls every few hours. I mean,
Yeah.
it is a sign of a high functioning healthcare system in some respects. And, you know, I would say one of our fears at OutRight is that we know that as the pandemic really reaches deep into countries around the world that don't have high functioning healthcare systems, they won't be so lucky, right? They won't be getting to see a doctor at all, much less hearing from the doctor multiple times a day. And so I wanted to ask you if you could sort of, speak to what your fears are for how COVID is going to impact LGBTIQ human rights around the world. We've started to see some initial signs. Our colleague Ami Bishop said, listen, there's an initiative moving through the Liberian parliament that Liberia is a country that already criminalizes homosexuality. But this new initiative proposes to remove bail for people that are arrested under sodomy charges. It's just outrageous. And of course, we've seen even statements from the UN treaty bodies saying a pandemic cannot be an excuse to crack down on human rights. But I think for a lot of us, we're afraid that this is just going to be a further justification for eroding civil society, cracking down on free speech, increasing criminal penalties for anyone who's seen as undesirable, and for LGBTIQ people who already have been, in many countries, questioned as full citizens and full human beings. It could be quite frightening. What do you think, Paul?
It's absolutely frightening, and exactly the things that you're describing are happening everywhere. It's not only Liberia. Hungarian parliament is discussing giving the government full authority over everything, and the Hungarian government. So that's within the EU, that's within Europe. That means that an authoritarian state will be born within the EU, which is unimaginable. We saw in the Philippines, where our colleague Cristobal is working, that there is a curfew, that there's a lockdown on everything, and it has an impact on LGBT people. Like, many people are so dependent on their small businesses or other activities that they do to keep an income. It's all closed. So how do people survive? Can people go back to families? Often not, because those families have kicked them out. Can people get to their medicines if they need some medicines? As you say, in many countries, it's not as good. The health systems are not as good arranged as in the European or US or in the US. So how do these people get the medicines? It's all questions. And I think we only see now the start of how this virus is going to impact LGBTIQ people all around the world. I mentioned Philippines, but I just came back from South Africa, where people are just very scared in the townships. How to keep 1.5 meters or 2 meters distance. These houses are tiny. There is no way to keep 2 meters distance. And how it affects LGBT people? Well, people are being shut down from their support systems and life systems, from their peers, from their shelters, if need comes. Like, I really fear that we will see a spike in violence, in homophobia and hate, we had reports from some countries that some of the really disgraceful religious leaders were calling that exactly this virus was the punishment of God, because the Europeans and US are having same-sex marriages and are supporting LGBT people. So it's just another excuse to spark the hate against our communities. And I think that's what we're going to see a lot more. More hate, more violence, less economic opportunities, people really without any form of getting an income or a livelihood, and those kinds of issues, health issues, people can't access medicines. So I think we will see a large variety of issues that are coming the way of our communities.
Mm. Thanks for describing just some of them, but what I hear you saying is that when LGBTIQ people have been rejected by their families, they can't go home to those people for shelter and refuge and safety at this time. We also know that many LGBTIQ people who haven't been kicked out of their family homes experience family and domestic violence within their parents' homes. So being at home is supposed to be the model for keeping us safe right now, but for a lot of people, it actually won't keep them safe.
No, it makes us threat.
Dark in this room, so if our audience would just bear with us while I turn on a light, I think that would be helpful. All right. You know, we don't even have a camera crew. There are no lighting specialists. Very low budget here in my living room.
For the audience, I was asking for a makeup artist to make me look pretty, but even that is not possible.
Well, my husband is a professional makeup artist, but he's quarantined. So
yeah.
Maybe next episode of OutRight TV. On a more serious note, Paul, I think that while we see growing pressure on LGBTIQ people around the world, you know, hate speech and rhetoric that blames LGBTIQ people for creating COVID, we've actually had to radically change how we work. So my question for you is, can you describe the work that OutRight had to put on hold or change because of the COVID crisis?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like we had to hold most of our activities or find new ways of doing them. Just to give two very sad or good examples is that we were about to give a safety and security training in Haiti, where the community lost their leader a couple of months ago in November, Charlotte Jeudy. And we agreed on the training and everything, and it couldn't happen anymore because the borders were closed and the training couldn't happen. So we looked at other ways how to do it. People say, oh, do a virtual training. Well, the infrastructure on ICT in Haiti is just not strong enough, it's not good enough. So we can't do it in that way. It means that we can't do anything at the moment. So as an alternative is that we are in touch with the community all the time, give them support in the form of calls, make sure if people experience issues that people have access to resources for as long as this crisis takes to keep them safe and to keep things going. That's the best we can do in Haiti at the moment. Another example is the regional GBV forum that we had planned to launch in the Philippines with experts from all over.
Yes.
Sorry?
Can you tell our audience what GBV is?
Yes, Gender-Based Violence Forum. Sorry for that, acronyms. So we were really excited to launch this forum with about 25 experts from all across Asia. It had to be canceled because of the crisis. Travel restrictions and health measurements made it impossible to have this forum. And exactly now, when we know that our communities are going to experience a spike in gender-based violence and in violence, this would have been such a great mechanism to collect data, to address issues, to make people aware of these issues. It can't happen. We said, well, to keep it going, we will organize webinars, for example, of at least give like a sneak preview what this forum could do, and maintain the contact between the experts until we can have the inaugural meeting, hopefully later this year. So as you hear, like we try to do things through ICT and working online as we do as well within the organization. But I also strongly believe in the power of meeting in person to make things happen. We try to go on as best as possible, make or design alternative strategies to do things online. Also really count on resilience and reliance of people's creativity in the countries to find other ways on doing things or delivering things. But we also have to be frank and fair, say, well, many things are on hold or only slowing going on for the moment. And actually, with all the things happening to our communities, maybe it's also good to turn like an eye on the impact that this crisis has and dedicate some energy to making sure that all the effects, that we can alleviate a little bit the effects that this crisis has for our work in the communities.
Well, let's pivot then, because even though we've all been working from home, even though we had to scrap our work plans and develop a new way of working, we've actually been busier than ever. And I think that's something that separates OutRight from some of even my own friends and family members who suddenly find themselves unable to do their job because it's so focused on in-person interactions. But we have pivoted. We've pivoted in a really profound way. I mean, certainly the first thing we all did was just sort of fan out across the world to check in with LGBTIQ activists to see, are you safe? Do you have food? Do you have shelter? Do you have a place to be? Do you have access to healthcare? What can we do to help you? How are you shifting in this environment? And I think, you know, as you would expect, our colleagues in Asia were hit first and hardest. So they're amazingly strong, but they've been going through this longer than the rest of the world. So they're also weary. But we've gotten some amazing stories back. I was looking at some of the photos we collected for some of the documentation we've been doing, and I saw this picture of an LGBTIQ organization in the Philippines that volunteers every single night on emergency supplies distribution to help in the COVID crisis. I mean, it was incredible, you know, and they've got their like head to toe gear on, but they're finding a way to do it. I mean, who would have thought that the local LGBTIQ organization would be doing food packets and medical supplies? Mm-hmm. But OutRight has also done that. Can you tell us about the emergency fund we've launched? Can you tell us why we're doing OutRight TV? And can you allude to an exciting project that we're issuing in a month without giving it all away?
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, as OutRight, as I was saying, we see only now the impacts that this crisis is having on our community. So as OutRight, we felt the absolute need to come up with an emergency response fund to get resources to those organizations and communities on the ground to make sure that they can live through this crisis. Because this will not go away, as some people think. This will have a longer lasting impact. And we need to be there to make sure that they can keep on going, that there is immediate assistance for anything that they need. So what really excites me about this fund is that it supports everything. Like, there's no restrictions. If there's a need, OutRight can support it, and that's beautiful. And I think that's the uniqueness of this fund, that we will be able to do so. So it will be launched, or it is launched. We're doing a lot now to collect, to raise funds for it. And 15th of April, we will open the portal to get applications in from all groups all across the world, except for Europe and the US and Canada, because we feel the need is worldwide. This virus is not stopping in Asia or in Africa. It affects everybody. So hopefully,
Let me just ask you to pause. So for any of our viewers out there who want to know about it, this is OutRight's brand new 24 hours old COVID-19 LGBTIQ emergency response funds. We launched it last night. We already have donations coming in. We're enormously grateful, but we really want to raise a lot more. The overwhelming majority of the funds, 75%, will be used to give out grassroots organizations at the grassroots level will receive grants between $2,500 and $10,000 for anything they need, because all of these organizations are experiencing a spike in demands. And then the other part of funds that we raise, 25%, will be used to ensure that there's good, clean, accountable grants administration, because yes, it is really important to have clean books. but also to do some of these other urgent projects we're developing. Do you want to speak to those, Paul?
No, absolutely. Just to come back to what you were saying there, just to give an example, like I was in touch yesterday with one of our colleagues in Uganda, a trans organization. They can't access hormones anymore. People are just getting desperate. So we need to get funds to them to make sure that they can get those hormones somewhere else. So I can't stress enough the necessity and the need that is there, and the necessity for this fund and to get the money to them rather soon than later. So the sooner we can get out grants, the happier I will be. In projects that I envision under this fund, but also other, like, next to all the other things that we're doing, like we're trying to keep on track, also make governments accountable to keep LGBTIQ people in their vision and in their programs, because we see that governments will kick people out, like they are not as interested. We have to make sure that we end stigma, discrimination, and violence that we see spiking. We need to carry on with fighting the GBV that our communities are experiencing. So there's a lot of projects that are there, but I think for the coming 6 to 10, 12 months, it will be a lot crisis response, making sure that people, and especially our communities, can do the work, mobilizing communities, advocating, and carrying on. Because if we don't do that, I fear that the LGBTIQ movement that has been so carefully built up over the last 25, 30 years globally will disappear. And that is something that we as OutRight can't see. It can't happen. It shouldn't happen. It must not happen. And that's a thing that we are going to work on very hard with the colleagues on the ground to make sure that they keep on going.
Well, I came from a meeting 2 days ago with a diverse collective of LGBTIQ organizations from the US. And one after another talked about the need for drastic measures to be taken to ensure survival of their organizations in this time of crisis. And I actually was so taken aback, because OutRight's focus is always on organizations that are working on a shoestring budget, not organizations that have fancy offices, their own office buildings, staff of 100 people. No, we focus on organizations where they're lucky if they have staff. They're lucky if they have an office rather than just a computer in their kitchen or bedroom. But to hear that LGBTIQ organizations in the US are already feeling the impact of this crisis financially. I mean, they said to me, our donations have dried up. And if that's what people are saying in the richest country in the world, what is it going to be like in Uganda, in Lebanon, in Nigeria, in Indonesia? Who's going to be there to support them? So I really appreciate the points that you've made. I'm going to keep an eye on the clock, because our viewers may want to know that we're aiming to have like 25-minute specials from OutRight TV. So we're coming up on the 25-minute mark, but just some things to look forward to, both supporting the fund and then seeing the amazing projects that get supported coming out of it. Everything from emergency food, shelter, to information dissemination, to even things like strengthening activists' internet connections so that they're not so isolated, so that the work can continue. We're launching a webinar series. The first one will be next week. We're going to be covering a broad range of topics so that as LGBTIQ activists, we can share information, we can learn, we can stay connected, we cannot go crazy by staying together as a community. OutRight is conducting a monitoring and documentation project. Paul already gave some amazing examples of the kinds of things that are happening in real time that are going to devastate LGBTIQ communities. We have to capture that evidence and then figure out what to do about it. And then this last piece is holding the governments and UN agencies accountable. If in mass crisis, what tends to happen is that those with a lot of power and money, they think about, how can I help the greatest number of people all at once? And this is a very good strategy in many ways, but we have to recognize that LGBTIQ people often don't have the same experience as the so-called majority. So in order to reach LGBTIQ people, we need special services, we need special resources, or else, as you say, Paul, the community could find itself on the brink of disaster. I want to near towards conclusion with two quick questions. The first one is just a personal question. What are your coping strategies? How are you getting through this? You're cooking for your husband on the other side of the guest room door. What else are you doing?
Well, guilty pleasure. I watched all the seasons of RuPaul's Drag Race again. Like I'm now in season 3, so we're getting there. But it's fun and it's good, and it's a good diversion from not thinking too much, and also not reading all the news, because you go crazy with 24 hours of Corona news. So I love RuPaul, I love Drag Race. Can't wait to see season 12, but it's a good coping strategy.
Right. This is a perfect opportunity for me to make a plug for something I think all of our viewers should know. Shangela was robbed. Okay, last question. What's your message to anyone who might be watching this? Like, what can people do to ensure that LGBTIQ people globally are not a disproportionate casualty of the COVID crisis? Like, what gives you hope? What do you want people to do?
I want people to care. I want people to feel that we're all humans, and think and be very rational and like intentional about being human. I have a humanist background, and I believe wholly in the power of people, but we have to do it all together. And what we see now is that what we saw, those horrible images that some people say, oh, everything's for me. We should really get away from that. We need to get through this crisis all together.
Yeah.
There's no individualism, even though it has been promoted so much in our societies. Like, this is a thing we have to be together, and it includes everybody, whether we like it or not, and no one can be left behind. And it includes LGBTIQ people. We have to be mindful and look out for those people that are not as fortunate and are being left behind at the moment, because we see it happening all over the world. So my plea for everybody is, like, look a little bit more at your neighbor. Look around you. Notice messages from people, or messages that you're not getting anymore from people that maybe you saw or whatever. Be mindful about social messaging of people, of each other all around the world. So let's get this done, this crisis, all together. Everybody has a role, and everybody should take a role, so that at the end of this, maybe in 3 months, 6 months, we come out of this stronger and rebuild all the damage that this crisis has left us with.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for your call to action, your words of wisdom, your absolutely incredible work. I think you keep all of our spirits a little higher at OutRight, and I don't know how you do it. Well, I didn't know until today, and now I know that secret sauce is RuPaul's Drag Race. RuPaul, if you're watching this, feel free to host our next gala. We're going to have one day. And I just want to say again to our viewers, thank you for tuning in to OutRight TV. I'm Jessica Stern, the Executive Director of OutRight. You can find out more information about our work, including the OutRight COVID-19 LGBTIQ emergency funds, on our website, www.outrightinternational.org. Everyone, keep trying and stay safe. Bye.